and I'll recognize Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. I'm pleased that we're beginning the long overdue process for hearings on tax reform, although I think, as Mr. Larson mentioned, it would have been better if we had done those hearings prior to when the Republicans passed their tax bill, but here we are. Republicans held the committee gavel for 8 years, and in that time, they used that time to focus on multinational corporations, while middle-class and aspiring middle-class Americans often had to take second jobs to make ends meet. It's impossible in this hearing to address all of the missed opportunities that we could have had in the last tax bill, so I'm going to focus on just a couple. And I want to start with Ms. Tirado. I know that you're a DC native and you spent some time in Florida, but your story reminds me of so many stories that I hear from constituents in Southern California, and I really want to thank you for your testimony, but I wonder if that side of the dais has listened to your testimony, because clearly all this rosy information about how the tax bill has helped everybody, it really hasn't helped you, has it?
Yeah, I've been listening, and I've already done my taxes, and I saw some extra money from Maryland. They have some things for teachers, but not from the federal side. So all of the great things that they're talking about from the tax.
All these wonderful things, you know, unemployment is down and wages are up. Are you feeling that personally?
No, and you know, unemployment rates dropping isn't instantaneous. It didn't happen in the last 2 years. That's a decade's worth of work, and I think that needs to be recognized as well.
Thank you. And as you mentioned in your written testimony, you know, I think you've done far more than society asks of you. You've served your country in uniform, you teach, you volunteer in your community, all while trying to further your own education and trying to raise 2 children on your own, which I think is the most amazing thing, are single mothers in this world. I'd like to talk to you about something that hits close to home for me, too. I have 4 boys, 3 of them stepsons and 1 of my own. I want to talk about child care costs, because all the unemployment in the world isn't going to help working parents afford child care. You mentioned that child care costs were not only half of your take-home pay in Florida, but that a need for child care assistance was one of your the factors in your decision to move back to D.C.
It was.
And I'm sure as an educator, you know how important early learning is.
Yes.
I want you to tell us that as we look to maybe realign some of the benefits so that middle-class families do really get relief, what should we know about your attempts to access quality and affordable child care?
Well, in Florida, child care was provided to me by a church. You know, church is very important in my community, and my child care expenses were actually supposed to be $1,200 a month, but I went to the pastor of the church with my situation, and he gave me that discount, so it would only be $1,000 a month, and I took a second job to help me pay for it, and then, of course, the father of my children helped me out as well. But even with all of the help from my ex-husband, from the pastor of my church, I still had to take on a second and a third job. So I worked until 7 o'clock in the evening after teaching all day, and then I worked on Saturdays as well to keep up with childcare. When I look at my students, a lot of my students are late to school every day because they have younger brothers and sisters because their parents can't afford childcare. They have to take their younger brothers and sisters to school first and then come to school. Then they're late. They don't get there till second period or lunchtime. And then we say they were absent from school for the whole day because of the rule that if you miss one class, then you're absent for the whole day. Then we tell them at the end of the year, you have too many absences and you failed the entire school year and have to repeat the year because their parents can't afford childcare.
Yeah,
so
amen. I wish we could, you know, blast that out over every television set and radio in the United States. You've had to get a second job, so the tax bill didn't help you climb out of, you know, the deficit of your wages aren't going up, and you've got student loan debt, and the cost of milk isn't the same, you know, from one week to the next.
No.
I mean, all of those expenses go up. Interest rates are going up. When you hear like, well, GDP is great and unemployment is low, you know, the reality is those are statistics, but those statistics reflect lower paying jobs or jobs that don't provide the kind of benefits that you need in order to support your kids and make sure that they have health care. I mean, I really want to drive down that point because you can hear statistics, but you hear stories like yours, and yours is not unique. How many people do you know that are similarly situated where they're struggling to afford childcare and basic necessities and their wages aren't going up?
Every
Time has
single
expired.
teacher I've ever worked with, all the teachers I've ever worked with have the same problem, all of them.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you
testimony.
very
I
much.
yield back.